let's get started. I am not Dan Griffiths. I am Maureen Mulligan, and I'm president of the Philadelphia Solar Energy Association. And this is the first in a series we're going to be doing. We haven't totally decided how often we're going to do these, but we're committed to do much more education than we have in a while, and at least in this format. And so I welcome you all and feel that appreciate in particular you coming on a call with all the stuff going on in the world right now, to spend time with us and prioritize this is certainly appreciated. So we have two speakers, probably known to most of you. Liz Robinson, who is the director of the Philadelphia Solar Energy Association and a longtime activist on energy and affordability as well through her role at Energy Coordinating Agency. And Ron Celentano, which I'm fond of saying is the father of Pennsylvania solar, with just a long and deep experience in solar and continues every day working on these issues, both on the technical and the policy side. So if I spent all the time reading their resumes, we wouldn't have any time for the workshop itself. So I'm going to stop there and quickly tell you about the agenda, which is energy affordability, can solar help? And then we're going to go into Ron's presentation, which is about the current state of solar and looking at where Pennsylvania fits in that mix. And then apparently Aaron Nichols is on, and we're going to show his video on balcony solar, which is also called plug-in solar, and try to reserve some time for Q&A as well. Last thing I want to say before turning it over to Liz is that she provided several resources, which I hope you'll take the time to read and go over because there's a lot of good background information there. Liz, you want to take it?
Sorry,
There we
y'all.
go. Yep.
My apologies. I fouled up something here and cannot access my slides. So I'm
Oh.
just going to talk really quickly without showing the slides.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the condition of energy affordability in the United States is changing by the day. And the problem that we have, energy costs are rising dramatically everywhere across the country. Um, and the reasons for it are multiple. We've got this perfect storm of um, aging infrastructure in the United States, combined with rapidly rising demand for energy. And we've got the underlying accelerant of climate change pushing all of these problems, making all of these problems worse. And then we have really bad public policy. We have, in many states, we've got some good policy coming along, but federally, it's we've never had worse energy policy at the federal level. The causes of energy prices rising, really, frankly, I'm just going to kind of roll these off. But we have the distribution grid. We've got failures, increasing problems with poles and wires. The same is true with the transmission grid. The transmission infrastructure is aging. United States has some of the oldest transmission infrastructure in the world, and our infrastructure really needs to be updated and upgraded. We've got, as I mentioned, very rapidly rising demand from new sources of demand from AI data centers and hyperscalers. That's been a big new entrant into the realm. The Trump administration has made a whole series of very bad decisions, starting with requiring coal plants to stay online. These coal plants were retiring for reasons that they are uneconomic, And that means that by requiring them to stay online, it adds hundreds of millions of dollars to the rate base, to ratepayers. The other thing that Trump has done at the same time that demand is rapidly rising is that he canceled, through executive action, all of the offshore wind projects, which are huge. Fortunately, the courts have brought those back into place. So most of those projects are going to go forward. However, the delay from the cancellation by the Trump administration has added, in some cases, billions of dollars of additional cost to these projects. So, and now, of course, we have a war in Iran. So oil and natural gas prices are rising very rapidly. As oil prices rise, it drives natural gas prices up. Natural gas prices are rising for many of the same reasons. And of course, as natural gas prices rise, that drives up electricity prices. As electricity prices rise, that drives up water prices. So you have this cascading ripple effect of prices rising from this now 6 days of war in Iran. That's only going to get worse. That problem's going to get a lot worse before it gets better. Um, so we've got this whole panoply of problems. In addition to that, I want to mention something that very few people are aware of. In Pennsylvania, we have been permitting the utilities for more than a decade to earn the highest rate of return on equity of any state in the nation. The return on equity that's been permitted in Pennsylvania is almost 13%. The national average is less than 8. So this is adding almost $500 million to the rate base every year across the state. This is completely avoidable, completely avoidable, and that is a problem that is driving up costs. Then on top of all, or underneath all of this, frankly, is climate change. And that is an accelerant. It drives many of these problems and makes them worse. For example, the distribution grid. One of the issues there also is inflation and tariffs, making many materials more costly. So it's not just one thing. It's a lot of things. A lot of reasons are driving cost up. And in order to bring costs down, to bring electricity prices down, there's not a silver bullet. There is no silver bullet. We have to really use every tool in the toolbox. So there are many, many solutions that we need. In Pennsylvania, all three, Maureen, Ron, and I have been at this for a long time. And I personally have never seen so much good clean energy legislation being introduced. So we've got lots of good things coming that are, popping up every day. Today, for example, a virtual power plants bill, HB 2264, just came out. So almost every day recently, there has been something significant happening. So just to kind of run down some of the solutions that we need HB 504, which is the AEPS. That will amend the portfolio standard and get us from 8% renewable energy where we are now to 35% renewable energy by 2035. In addition, that's HB 501, sorry. HB 504 is community energy, which is both community solar and biodigesters. That bill has passed the House and is stuck in the Senate. We have HB 1971, which is the balcony solar or plug-in solar bill. That has yet to move. And we have, frankly, community choice aggregation. That is a policy that is beginning to move its way through both the courts, and we hope to see legislation in the near future. There are just many, many good policies, and virtual power plants, which landed today. So I want to end with this thought, which is that one of the more interesting studies I've seen recently was done by Synapse, And it looked at the problems of PJM, the PJM grid, the grid that we're part of. And it found that if we can double the amount of what they call advanced energy technologies, if we can double advanced energy technologies in the next few years by 2035, no later, we will be able to reduce the problems on the grid, which are adding to every year we see more outages, longer outages. We can improve reliability by 97%, and we can reduce the collective bill of by $178 billion. So this is across the entire region, of course. This is 64 million people we're talking about when we talk about PJM, but this is really significant. And advanced energy technologies is a bundle of clean energy resources, energy efficiency, renewable energy, battery storage. Those are the main ones. So that's the key to getting prices down, and really want to, um, you know, um, urge everybody to become more active at the state level, because I think there's a great opportunity now because of the energy affordability crisis. And I'll turn this over to Ron.
Mhm. Oh, hello. Okay. Let's see. Hopefully I'll get through with my slides here and see if I can do the share. Uh, this, this. Can you see that?
It's a black,
Yes.
yes, there you go.
Okay, good. Okay, and then I have to do a control, shift, alt, H. Okay. Great. Okay, so I'm going to really show two things with regard to just sort of a solar update. Many of you may have seen my kinds of presentations in the past, so it's just giving you a status of where we are with how much solar has been installed in the state. And I'll be running over a little bit. I'd like to do a plug-in solar overview. And we'll and hopefully we'll have some time for questions and we can kind of go over that. And that plugin solar overview will include Aaron's video that he just recently posted, which is going to be great. So I want to, let me see, there we go. Can you see that slide?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. So I know it's all working. And let me just minimize this. There we go. Put this up here. Okay. So the upper left graph is the total megawatts that's installed in 17 states on the East Coast. And I always like to show this. Where does Pennsylvania stack up against the rest of these states in the US? And you can see Pennsylvania, as far as total megawatts installed, we're about in the middle, not number 9 out of 17. But when you do, look at about per capita, megawatts per capita, we're last place. And we have been last place for years. I've never, ever seen us move even into second to last. It's always been in last place. So this is always a pretty important thing to note where we are with regard to that. And a lot of it's, some of our policy situation. We are a gas state, which doesn't help our situation. But nevertheless, it's always been a problem with regard to that. This is showing the absolute megawatts installed, both in annual and cumulative. So the upper right, of course, is the annual. And you can see we really did max out in 2024. And then, so we have about in the lower graph on the left, it's kind of showing that we have about we're over two gigawatts installed in AC, almost 2 gigawatts in DC. I always like to kind of show those two, but this is basically showing the DC capacity in the graph itself. This is the total numbers of systems that have been installed, again, annually as well as cumulative. So we're over 81,000 solar PV systems installed in Pennsylvania since going back, 1997, I think, is when we really kind of became connected to the grid on a lot of projects. This is a breakdown of those systems and categories, and I have this showing both on the DC side and the AC side. And as many of you may know, and if not, just kind of clear it up. DC is really the sum of all the solar panel specs. So, I have a 50-watt solar panel. I have so many of them up there. I sum all those panels up. That would be the DC capacity of a solar system. The AC capacity is the sum of the inverter capacity. And the inverters tend to be, more often than not, smaller in size. It's converting the DC to AC. So you might have a 10 kW DC system on your roof with that's the sum of the solar panels up there, but you may only have an 8 kW inverter. So it's the 8, basically it was being summed up here on the right side. And I like to show the one on the right more because it's really what kind of gives us a sense of how much of what's all been installed in Pennsylvania is behind the meter, net metered systems that are serving facilities and reducing their electric bills versus the grid scale or the large utility scale size systems that are selling to off-takers. And they're basically big generators at selling at wholesale prices. So we can see about and that's kind of that division point is about the 3 megawatts in size. That's sort of the line that divides what is on the distributed generation side, the net metered side, versus what's on the grid scale side. So we can see about half of those, in terms of capacity, half of those systems are behind the meter and the other half are in front of the meter. So, and that's where we get that 2.2 gigawatts of capacity. This is kind of showing a graphic over the past few years of that. So again, the colored, bar stack graphs here are really showing those categories. The grid scale is the blue, and then the behind the meter is the breakdown of the large commercial, small commercial, and the residential. And the gray behind it is again the sum of the total DC capacity. So as I said, it's going to be larger. It's just to have that in perspective. But the main thing to really note, though, is when you look at moving from 22 to 2023, that's when we start to really see some of these big scale projects coming into play and being installed. And I did have some other slides that were probably more, I thought maybe too complicated, but really talking about from the PJMQ, what kind of came in. We have in the past 3 years, 2023, 24, and 25, we've kind of had 1 gigawatt of capacity coming online, in Pennsylvania. And these are projects that are between 15 and up as much as 150 megawatts in size. So they really scale the market. They're all over many of the counties, mostly in the western part of the state. But just to say that things are slowly moving in the state. This is a bubble plot of the number of systems and the capacity of systems by county. And these are just relative bubbles, if you will, kind of give you a perspective on where they're dispersed across the state. And we are at about a little over 2% of our electric usage in Pennsylvania is served by solar. So that's where that 2% is coming in from. And it's still really low compared to where California is or New Jersey is or other states. This is on the current solar renewable energy credit price that we know. It is slowly going down. It's a little under $25 at this point. That's an SREC, or solar renewable energy credit, is a megawatt hour. So it's about $25 per megawatt hour. It used to be much higher in the past, and it's surprising it's even this high because we have met our renewable energy credit, we've met our alternative energy portfolio goals in 2021. So the market is actually saturated, and we are going we were supposed to have 0.5% of solar in Pennsylvania. Now we have 2%. So we have already saturated the market. It's surprising that the price of the SRECs are as high as they are. I want to go over real quickly a couple slides that came out of the PUC annual alternative energy portfolio report for 2025. And this came out from the Public Utility Commission. And it's kind of showing on the left, the pie chart is really showing the mix of electric resources that were from generation. And no surprises, nearly 60% is from natural gas, 30% is nukes, and then about 4.4% is coming from renewables. And that's, of course, beyond solar. It's including wind and other types of resources. And then we still have a little coal in there. But the thing I want to point out is a graph on the right where you see the trends over the years of the changes of coal, nuke, and natural gas. You see natural gas keeps on creeping up. And the very bottom yellow line there is showing pretty much no growth in renewables. It's pretty much a flat line. Years ago, when the PUC used to put out this, or rather when the PUC put out this report, they used to also show a graph of the national, of these lines, and you'd always see that line increasing. The renewable energy resource would be going up, but for here in Pennsylvania, it's pretty much been sitting flat, unfortunately. This is kind of showing a breakdown of the tier one or alternative energy renewable portfolio consisted of a tier one, a tier two, and then a solar carve-out piece. The tier one was renewable energy, and this has got a breakdown of the different renewable energy resources in the ring chart over here. And then on the right side, it's kind of showing the amount of monies that was spent for the credits that were sold from all those resources, and it's a tier one. In the upper right, you see solar. The 0.5% of solar that was paid out a little over 22 million. Then the tier one, which is the other rest of the renewables, the same things that you see on the left graph over there, and all the breakdown of that. And then the tier two, and that happens to be a lot of things that are really they aren't renewable really at all. Probably the only beneficial thing in there is energy efficiency, but I'll show a little bit of that a little bit later with regard to what that breakdown is. And on the bottom graph is really showing how, because we were closing our borders to some of these different resources, really kind of dictated the price increase. So that's why we can see the tier two price really, which is that green graph behind it, really exploded in 2020 because we had closed the borders for those resources. They had to be in Pennsylvania. And when they did that, the price literally went up like 300 times since when it was back in the day. So a lot of money has been spent on this tier two resource, which is something that we should be paying for. This is a breakdown of those tier two resources. I want to point out that waste coal is the number one resource of that. And I kind of did some quick math on this, and it basically comes down to that we basically, as ratepayers, sold about twice as much in payments to the waste coal generation for waste coal generation than of all the solar that was sold in Pennsylvania. So it's just kind of really absurd because it doesn't create jobs. It's not really providing any value. It's just lining the pockets of some of these old projects. I want to show this real quick. It's kind of a complicated presentation here, but it's showing the sizes of systems that are going in. These when a system is of the size of 500 kW or more, that has to be reported to the PUC, and that's what's really being shown here. This big thing that you may have been hearing about, merchant generators. These are big. We have a situation here in Pennsylvania that in the past just 2 or 3 years, there's been an explosion of these merchant generator applications going in. This is when you could put in a system as large as a 3 megawatt project, which is a decent size. It could be considered a net metered project. It could tie into the distribution line in an open field and back generate or all of that to the electric utility company, to a PECO or to a PP&L, and they'll get paid at the end of the year at the price to compare or the generation rate. So, for example, PP&L, that price is about 12 cents a kWh. So, for a plant that big, it becomes rather lucrative to have a situation like that. So these are really kind of exploding. It's becoming a real problem, both on the regulatory and legislative side of things, and it's becoming a real issue for us to deal with this going forward. Liz kind of touched base on some of these things, but I want to just throw these up real quick. We have with regard to some policy issues and bills that are out there and some accomplishments. We have our now second year for Solar for Schools, $25 million, and that's getting that is now starting to develop for new projects going into play. This House bill, rather Senate Bill 1019, is called a Smart Solar Siting Act, but in fact, it is dealing with net metering, and we've been really involved with trying to redline and change that the structure. It's really addressing that merchant generator issue that I was talking about. We want to preserve net metering for the small residential and small commercial size systems leave it as it is, because it is quite it's very important to have that for any of these projects to pencil. The House Bill 1971 will go over with the plug-in solar that was already introduced several months ago. Actually, it was last year. It was introduced, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, last year. And then some of these other, as Liz mentioned, the House Bill 501 for press, that's expanding the alternative energy portfolio standard basically for more renewables. And I did have in here there were these memos for virtual power plants, hosting capacity maps, which I won't get into talking about, and battery storage. But as Liz mentioned today, House Bill 2264, virtual power plants, was introduced, which is very exciting. PP&L has a Durham's per. I won't get into this stuff. It's like not enough time. But a lot of stuff's going on. It is really, really crazy busy out there. What's going on? So I'm going to jump into this plug-in solar, and I'm going to I'm going to just run this video that Aaron had prepared, which is a really good way to start this off. So hopefully this will work. Let's see. Can you see him?
So for today's episode, we decided to do.
I can't see it. I can just hear it.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, actually, it's probably right. He's not showing anything so much. So he's talking. So that meant listen to it anyway.
Yeah, it is a podcast.
Yeah. Okay. Go. There we go.
I'm your host, Aaron Nichols, the Research and Policy Specialist here at Exact Solar in Newtown, Pennsylvania. And today we're going into what you should know about plug-in solar. And I'd like to officially welcome you to what we might call the appliance era of clean energy. Now, what is plug-in solar? For decades, going solar has been a big project that's required home ownership, thousands of dollars in permits, and permanent roof modifications in most cases. But in the last few years, we've started to see mass market, quote, plug-and-play solar kits all around the world. These are often called balcony solar systems because anyone can slap them on a balcony, plug them into a standard wall outlet, and reduce their electric bills because the solar energy backfeeds the outlet. In many European countries, you can buy these kits in retail stores, go home, hang them on a railing, and start saving money immediately. I was in Europe last fall with my family, and I can verify that these kits are absolutely everywhere. And fun fact, the German word for them, which I'm going to pronounce wrong, is Balkenkraftwerk. This idea isn't new. As far back as 2011, when the US Department of Energy launched the Sunshot Initiative, it included a $25 million grant specifically for plug-and-play solar innovation. However, for the last 15 years, American plug-in solar adoption has been stalled by utility rules that are only designed for one-way power flow and the permitting nightmares that plague the solar industry. While the US stagnated, Germany became the global testing ground for balcony solar. Following a 2019 move to streamline utility connection rules, adoption there just exploded. By 2023, Germany saw a quadrupling of legal interconnected systems, proving that if you remove red tape, the public will choose to own their own power. As of mid-2025, Germany had nearly 800,000 registered balcony solar installations. Europe is so far ahead because of high electricity rates, a rental culture, and standardization. We will start with high electricity rates. Energy prices in Europe have historically been much higher than in the US, meaning that a $600 kit pays for itself in less than 3 years. There's also a rental culture, specifically in Germany. Over half of Germans rent their homes. The German Solar Package 1 policy of 2024 legally protected tenants' rights to install these systems. It put the burden of proof to deny them on landlords, who must now provide documentation if they want to refuse a balcony solar system to a tenant. Europe also adopted a standard 800-watt inverter capacity limit for these systems, which allowed these kits to be treated as household appliances rather than power plants. We're finally seeing enough demand for balcony solar that a major breakthrough in the US market happened on January 7th, 2026. UL Solutions, a company that provides independent testing, inspection, and certification of all kinds of products, released certification documentation that addresses the major safety hurdles. This includes things like touch safety. The system must shut off power to the plug's metal prongs if less than 1 second if it's unplugged, preventing shock risks. There's also breaker masking. Systems must monitor the total current in a circuit to ensure that the combined power from the grid and the panels never exceed the safe limits of your home's wiring. We'll talk a little bit more about this as we go on. Now that plug-in solar kits can be built to an agreed-upon set of standards, utility companies don't have as strong of a case, and there's less for legislators to push back on. So which states are thinking of legalizing? Currently, more than 24 states are advancing bills to legalize these systems. Here's where the major players stand. Utah, the pioneer in this area, passed House Bill 340 in 2025, which allows plug-in systems up to 1.2 kilowatts without utility approval or fees. In Virginia, House Bill 395 is currently moving through the Senate. Similar to Germany's version, it would prevent localities and landlords from prohibiting portable solar for apartment dwellers. In California, the Plug into the Sun Act is currently before the Senate Energy Committee. It aims to reclassify these kits as appliances like toaster ovens so that we can bypass expensive permits. In New York, the SUNY Act seeks to remove regulatory barriers specifically to provide equitable access for renters in high-density urban areas. And in Maine and New England, bills are currently moving through committee in Maine, Rhode Island, and New Hampshire to help residents combat some of the highest utility rates in the country. What's standing in the way? The final hurdle that we have to clear in order for Americans to have balcony solar is utility resistance. Monopoly utilities in states like Wyoming and Arizona have successfully lobbied to kill plug-in bills, arguing that they cannot be assured of the quality of consumer-installed products. On February 20th, Wyoming actually voted its bill down. Their protests are mostly based on islanding, saying that a system might stay energized during an outage or grid repair, posing a risk to line workers. It's important to note that this is a real concern. Obviously, if you have a power outage, you can't have voltage traveling through the wires while people are out trying to fix those lines. However, as we now know, UL 3700 certified kits are engineered to shut down instantly during outages. While we wait for the states and federal government to legalize these kits, there are several companies taking matters into their own hands, like Raya Power is a great example. Raya has built a combined solar and battery kit that anyone, including renters, can buy and install themselves. It bypasses the electrical panel and backs up critical appliances directly, eliminating any worries about backfeeding the grid. It lowers bills by running those critical appliances with solar and battery power, and it backs up those appliances in emergencies. Hopefully, as this technology becomes too good to say no to, we'll see more solutions like Raya's. And I interviewed one of the co-founders of Raya Power on This Week in Solar, so please keep an eye out for that episode. Thank you so much for tuning in today. As always, I'm your host, Aaron Nichols, and that has been This Week in Solar.
Okay, hopefully. Okay, are we back here? Let me see.
Yeah, we're back.
Can you see that?
Yeah.
You can see all the, okay, great. Okay, that worked out well. Well, I'm done because Aaron took care of everything and I'm over. No, so I'll elaborate and embellish a little bit more on a lot that he had said. So here's a couple of different, photographs of the balcony solar. And it's ironic, we're shifting the terminology of balcony solar to plug-in solar because there'll be a lot of applications that you wouldn't be hanging off any balcony at all. But these are some present kind of different pictures you could find on the internet. Um, as Aaron was saying, of course, very popular in Germany. I think I heard the number being up close to even to 1 million now that are over in Germany, and certainly throughout a lot of European countries. Um, and yeah, I mean, 28 I've been seeing it, 28 states have been considering it at this point, whether it's been in memos or it's actually in bill format. And of course, Pennsylvania has had it in play for a long time. And I do have you'll be able to get a copy of this presentation, and these links supposedly will bring you to the co-sponsorship memo and the bill itself that you could links that you can get to those documents if you want to download those. So basically, again, it's basically a off the shelf product that just plugs into an AC outlet. It includes a microinverter. It's a very simple device. And it doesn't, the key here too is ideally, it doesn't require any utility interconnection application process, electrical permit, or even electrical inspection. And this is going to really clear a lot of that headache away. It's possible, though, in fact, it could be very likely, depending on how it really works out, that you might still need an electrician to do some wiring for you. But the thing, too, is that it shouldn't really be backfeeding onto the grid either. So again, you would have maybe a system that's going to be relatively small, 2-4 panels, and it's really going to be maybe offsetting 5% of your electric usage on an annual basis. I mean, it depends. There's a lot of things that go into figuring that out, but that probably isn't going to be a situation where you're going to be backfeeding onto the grid. This is a kind of showing the different states that have or that are considering, and you can see the blue Utah has been the one that's been passed. But a lot of these have, you can see about half the country, over half the country is in fact considering plug-in solar. And I want to go a little bit get a little more detailed in the UL 37 listing or standard, I should say. And it was about the end of December of last year, or middle of December last year, when UL Standards Engagement, ULSE, were the ones that kind of put together sort of a layout, an outline of an investigation for interactive plug-in PV equipment and systems structure. And then in early January, it was UL Solutions that picked that up and kind of created a certificate program and testing structure or platform, if you will, that would be used to test all these devices, so that it does in fact meet safety standards that have been designed for this. Because what's different about this, and I kind of bring this down below, any of these microinverters or any inverter right now is already UL 1741 listed and IEEE 1547. They already do shut down once the grid is shut down, at least the grid types of systems. Once the grid shuts down, or you disconnect the inverter, if you will, it discharges within a couple of seconds, and it's safe, in that regard. These are always directly wired into like the electric panel, or it's not, you're not plugging anything in, so you don't have to worry about really a touch safety issue for the conventional types of solar inverters that are out there. But the things that UL 3700 is really taking further review of is the touch safety, the breaker masking, and the bidirectional ground fault circuit interrupter perspective. So the touch safety is, as Aaron was saying, like you pull out that plug, and if you happen to touch the prongs in that plug within like almost instantly, you'll get a shock. So the idea here is to actually drop it down even less than a second in order to not bear that risk. And not that it's going to be something that might take you out, but it probably wouldn't be very comfortable to feel it. The breaker masking, I'm going to demonstrate a little bit on how that kind of works out with some graphics. The bidirectional ground fault, I mean, we're talking about, this system is outdoors. It's in a wet environment. It's just like any kitchen or bathroom. You're going to put a GFI type plug or outlet in that area because of the concern of how water could adds to the safety risk of getting electrocuted. So this system is outdoors, and you want to have a GFCI receptacle as well for that. The breaker masking thing comes down to this. I'm going to show, I have 3 slides of this thing, and I would try to demonstrate what this is all about. You may have a dedicated line that comes right off the circuit breaker that goes right outside, and you have a dedicated circuit with a plug, and there you go. You're set to go. You plug it in there, you're done. But it may be more common that you don't really have any outdoor outlets. And in this case, this is kind of showing a panel of maybe a 15 amp breaker. And typically a circuit on a breaker is either serving overhead lights. In this case, it's like 4 outlets, that would be in a particular apartment or house. And in this doesn't show any solar in here. It's showing, hey, I'm going to put in a hair dryer and toaster oven. And these things are really drawing a lot of power. In fact, they're exceeding the power of what is or the current that the breaker is been sized for. So it'll trip. Okay, and that's serving its purpose. It's safe. It's the wire is getting hot. It's getting it's overloaded. So it's actually tripping the breaker, and you're bringing the safety down to a controllable level. So that's a good thing. Now let's introduce plug-in solar. Now it's important to where you actually would plug in that solar resource. In this kind of scenario, if you plug it in at the end of the circuit and you have those same loads coming on, you actually may not trip the breaker because you're actually serving those loads with power from both the grid as well as the solar, but it's coming across from both ends, so it's distributing that current flow across the wire and not overheating the wire in most cases. So this is kind of an acceptable situation. However, in this case, if I plugged it in very close to where the circuit breaker was, what happens, that's where the masking comes into play. The breaker cannot see the current that's coming in from the solar. These loads are being met, and they're continually being met, and the breaker is thinking, hey, everything's okay. Meanwhile, the wires are getting overheated, and that's where the danger might arise. So how this UL 3700 is going to address this is going to be interesting to me. It'll have to be able to determine how much current is flowing on that wire entirely, as well as what the loads are and what is being generated from the solar panel system. And it will basically either if it gets to be overheated, or it will either shut down or throttle down the solar generation. These are 3 products that happen to be out there now, and there's even more of them out there. Aaron already mentioned about the Rhea Solar, and you can see in the upper left, they're basically solar panels in a bin, and inside there's also a battery storage, so that if the grid goes down, it can then still serve as some battery backup. In the middle, we have EcoFlow, which is a very interesting and popular product that's out there. They are basically they have a huge litany of different sizes of backup storage, basically, and you can basically buy these things. They're batteries and inverters all packaged together. You can plug them into the wall. You can plug all kinds of appliances into it. It can run a whole house, actually. And if there's an outage, it will then provide immediately backup power. But if it doesn't have solar on it, obviously that storage will eventually be depleted if the time is that long. But once the grid comes back up, it automatically starts charging up again. But they do have a solar panel configuration along with it. So it's a very similar thing to the Rhea, if you will. On the right is the AP systems, which is just an inverter itself, a microinverter itself that plugs right into the wall, and you can plug solar panels into it. So that's going to be, in fact, I have one. I just bought it. It was $325. Hopefully I can maybe quickly show it to you, but it's I've yet to experiment with. I'm really excited. But the point here is that none of these are UL 3700 listed, because that hasn't come out yet. as an actual standard that can be used on products. But so it's a DIY. It's a do it yourself kind of thing, and it probably is not legitimate for you to use these products right now, but they're being sold, and so everyone's going to be really jumping at at trying to play with all these things. So here are links for all of these products. And other things just to consider that, basically, there, even though you don't have the interconnection and permitting costs, you may very well have to hire an electrician that has to install it. If it comes down to that it's an outlet that meets that UL 3700 that you have to plug the system into, then you're going to have to replace your outlet with a smart outlet, if you will. So you might need an electrician for that, or just to lay out and dedicate. So these will be adding into the cost of the system. There's a concern if you do play around with this, and if you do not have solar yourself, you don't have net metering and a structure for doing that, and you plug this type of system in, and you maybe have a few of these systems you're plugging in, you could possibly backfeed. And in fact, I know I will be backfeeding with my experiment in my house because I use very little electricity. It'll backfeed, and I know supposedly for a fact, years ago when Pico changed into their smart meters, they basically had this anti-theft thing going on in there, where if you were to backfeed through their meter, that it would, and you don't have you're not officially a net metered customer, that it will actually count everything that's being backfed will count as usage. So your bill will actually go up. It will not go down because of it. So just to give you a heads up on that, and being a little concerned about that. And there also maybe even be an alarm associated with it. They'll come out and they'll know that you're kind of fooling around with their electric meter. So, but if you do have solar, that means you're already set up for backfeeding. You add on these plug-in solar systems, and they could be backfeeding too. They won't see it, and you're good with that. That's not an issue. I strongly recommend, I think, with the concept of upcycling old solar modules or panels for plug-in applications, because there are so many that are coming down that are maybe 10 years old, 15 years old, and hate to see these things go into the landfill. They're perfect application for using them for this. So if you got, just the microinverter that you could plug in solar modules into them, it would be a great pathway for a lot of these used modules that are coming off roofs that could be then used as having a second life for this application. And just to say that when I have to say, some of the solar industry folks I've talked to about this, they're a little concerned about the DIY plug-in solar applications are coming in, because this is adding the potential for problems, maybe even fires or whatever, and it's a potential to give up sort of that black eye to the solar industry. We hope this doesn't happen, but once you hand this kind of stuff over, you go to IKEA, buy everything you want, plug it into everything you can. That you can see where that can get like kind of get out of control. So there are a couple in this green area. I have a couple links to a really good detailed white paper on the barriers of balcony solar. It's really one of the first ones that came out. And then down below it was just recently, I think last week or earlier this week, there was a good article in Canary Media on balcony solar. So that's it. Let me see if I can get
So,
it.
Ron, we have time for some questions, and someone put in the chat a question, and maybe we'll just start with that. And if others have questions, they can either raise their hand or put it in the chat. But this question is, would this work on an air conditioning unit circuit?
Yeah, but I want to also kind of show my if you can see this. Yeah, okay. So this is that AP microinverter. If you can see it. And here is the plug. You can see the plug that's tied to it. And here are the inputs that you could just, the MC4 connectors that you put basically two panels into this. So one into here and one into here, plug it in the wall, and it has Wi-Fi that will go to your router. It also has Bluetooth, so you can see immediately what it's doing, how it's generating power. So I'm excited to check this out. And like I said, 325 online. It was pretty cool. Okay, the question, sorry.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, well, it has to be on. I'm assuming the air conditioning is running off the grid. So that's one of the many appliances you have in your house. It will. I mean, these things just go and feed. It just runs through all of your circuitry. I mean, it's basically a load of least resistance, right? Um, so it would serve it. I mean, it would offset it if that's really the question. I guess I'm not sure. It's not going to directly be targeted to the air conditioning unless that was the only load that was being using power at that particular site. But yeah, it certainly would help.
I'll
Yes.
raise my hand.
Yes, I see it.
So I just wanted to say, typically for an apartment building, people are offsetting a portion of their load. So they're offsetting maybe 20, maybe 30% of their apartment's draw, of their apartment's usage. This is from experience in Germany. But these applications are already in use in the United States for camping. People have them on top of their vans. This kind of plug-in solar is
That's
already
very
in use.
that's very different, Liz. We're
Well,
talking
it is
those are
very
off
different,
grid.
but the
They're
the
off
tech.
grid. Off grid stuff is very different, and that has
Oh,
been around for a
okay,
long time.
but
This is a very different situation. So, it's going to be it's really running completely different, in its application phase.
okay, but I think the fact that you can buy these online,
Mhm.
as you have bought the inverter, is there's no stopping this,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, and
Mhm.
I think it's really critically important for legislation to be passed to develop and hasten the development and the use of standards, because there is a risk, and it's critically important to protect the homeowner and the apartment dweller, as well as all the fire people from these risks. So
Mhm.
I think that that's important to recognize.
Well, these will shut down, I will say. Even the one that I got, it's following the typical inverter, requirements, so that if the grid went down, these would not backfeed onto the grid. So that's one thing that's for sure, even the thing that I got. So
Oh,
that's
that's great.
yeah.
That's great.
There is another question,
Yeah.
and is there any hope of pending legislation aimed at increasing they say RPS, the AEPS in Pennsylvania, so that the SREC prices, if legislation passed, would increase?
Yeah, I mean, if we did get something passed to expand the APS, the Alternative Energy Portfolio Standard, even in the House Bill 501, yeah, absolutely. We would be setting, the what we're called the ACPs, the oh God, I forget what they represent now. Anyway, compliance payment, a higher level, so the prices would definitely go up.
Yeah. Okay, I see no more comments or questions in the chat. Anyone's hand raised? I don't see. Okay, here's one. Um, would plug-in solar only work for apartments that have separate metering? And there's a couple parts to this question. Could it work balconies for a co-op? Could balconies work for a co-op that doesn't offer separate electric billing to the members for instance?
Yeah, I mean, it'll work wherever there's an outlet. I mean, you just plug it in and it'll work. The question for, whether like a condo, they're going to allow a solar panel hanging off the balcony. That's going to be the issue, but it'll absolutely work. There's no question about it. And I want to also point out the fact that you're going to get maybe I would estimate on average you're going to get about a third of the generation from that solar panel system as compared to optimally oriented with total exposure and everything, like just because of the fact that it's probably going to be almost vertical versus tilted. It's going to be probably getting some shading impacts, whatever. But just to take that into account. So it might, in fact, offset something like 5% or less than 5% of an electric bill.
Someone asked if the exact solar Substack was available, and Aaron put the link in there. So if you want to check the chat for that, if you haven't already. I think we have one more question coming in. Okay. Oh, yes, from Lisa. Is west the ideal side of the building to put it on?
South is the ideal. I mean, if you have the choice, south would be the ideal. But
Even though it's vertical?
yeah, well, I mean, vertical, yeah, absolutely, because you're going to get when you have a solar panel vertical on facing due south, you get about 60% of what it would be perfectly oriented or tilted facing south. But as you move further away from east or west, you're going to definitely going to reduce that even more so.
I would have thought that because the sun is lower in the sky on the west side. No?
Yeah, but during the morning and most of the early middle part of the day, it's not seeing anything. I mean, it's seeing diffuse lighting, but it's not really seeing much solar that can be causing creating generation.
Okay, that is the last question, and it's 7:59, and
Liz
I
has
just
her hand up.
I want
Oh,
to raise one
sorry,
more
Liz.
question. This is a comment. Because of Act 129, so this is the law that requires all the utilities to do energy efficiency measures. We are now entering the fifth phase of that. This is a bill, a law that passed 20 years ago now. So the utilities are already subsidizing or they're already incentivizing solar, both for commercial buildings and residential buildings through Act 129. So, for example, if you install a solar system in PECO's territory, they'll give you a rebate of, is it $500, Ron?
Yeah.
$500. And if you put solar on a commercial building, you get 10 cents for every kilowatt hour generated in the first year. So if for a commercial building, it's a considerable incentive. So it's possible, in my mind, that this measure, these small plug-in units, could be incentivized through Act 129. And particularly for apartment buildings, multifamily buildings, because that is a sector that's really easy to do something like this. A plug and play kind of measure is really simple. You could, if the building owner, all the balconies face south, building owner likes the look of it, he agrees to it, they can all be installed in one day, essentially. So that is an opportunity, I think, to do this at a pretty big scale. And it could frankly be used in affordable housing for lower income people, senior citizen housing. A lot of seniors live in apartments. I think it's a measure that has a lot of application for helping people who really need to save money to do so. And it is an energy affordability measure, definitely. And the price could be offset by the utility because of Act 129. Maybe not entirely. We'd have to figure out the savings, the savings investment ratio, the cost benefit, but it's certainly possible. And I just think this has a lot of application. It's very, very interesting and is something that Solar United Neighbors is also really pushing plug-in solar nationally. So there are a lot of groups beginning to work on this nationally. So you might be hearing, from a number of groups.
Yeah, I mean, Paul brought up, the other concerning issue. It's not only electrical or that you have to be concerned about, it's also structural. And it's like how well are these panels hanging on anything,
Yeah.
really securely and not like, you have like 35 stories and there's a panel flying off the thing and it's
Right. I like the look of the ones that are kind of made for a certain balcony, a certain frame, and they kind of go in there and they look good. You know what I mean? They don't look like your laundry,
It can be challenging to come up with that universal locking in mechanism, to really secure those modules onto the railing.
Lisa will work on that.
I was going to say my son will work on that.
Yeah.
There you go.
I think we got Paul's question answered. Let me see. Are there height restrictions? We didn't talk about that with taller rental properties as wind factor increases.
Well, that's generally true. Sure. I mean, that's true with any solar. I mean, again, it's got to be, mounted securely, onto structures or on the ground. At least what's good about, I guess it's the REA is that it's already in a bin, so that's kind of like you're just plopping it right on the ground and it's already intact.
Yeah, it's got a ballast.
Yeah. Hmm.
Well, as we close out here, I just wanted to alert you that we're going to be sending out, Liz is going to be sending out a draft letter since we're focusing on balcony or plug-in solar tonight. She drafted a letter to go to Representative Liz Fiedler, who's been instrumental in pushing as much as she can a lot of solar legislation, and this is one of them, one of the things she's involved in. And so we wanted to send out as many letters as we can. And so the draft letter will be coming your way, so please look for that and for our next webinar. So thanks for attending, everyone.
Yeah.
Thank
Thank you
you.
very much.
Nice.